Though considering the horrific carnage here from other tragedies we already know about where high-potency cannabis may have played a role, it's important that Americans have more answers. We deserve to know the truth about this multi-billion-dollar and growing industry, how it's affecting our young people, our working-age population, and even our military readiness.
Okay, so every time there's a really bad mass shooting, the different hosts on Fox News get to throw darts at a dartboard, and each of the sections is a different thing that they're supposed to think is responsible for it. So I don't know, maybe Sean Hannity hit video games this time around. Jesse Waters hit masks were the cause of it. He literally said that recently. Laura Ingraham believes it's pot because, I don't know, her core audience like came of age in the 50s and reefer madness is still persuasive to them. So on Tuesday night, she said that mass shootings were the fault of a dysfunctional home life where drugs put kids on a highway to hell. Pot use, especially among teens, can trigger psychosis and increase the chance that the young person will develop violent behaviors. Now, people have mocked this. Silence on Twitter calls her not a journalist. Jeffrey says, I've smoked, as many people have, I've smoked my fair share of weed. I've never shot anyone with a gun. These are all reasonable points, and we criticized what Laura Ingraham had said on the Wednesday edition of the Young Turks. She has been continuing on about this. Like Wednesday night, she was once again saying, what are they trying to silence us for, Brett? When we have this evidence that people are losing their minds over high levels of THC, I think we know that this is not the cause. I think it's an interesting angle to take in a period where more and more people are okay with marijuana legalization to once again try to make this the scapegoat for gun violence.
It's so weird that the right is trying to be cool now. And they haven't caught on that marijuana is super cool. Like that's what's so weird. Like they're showing their colors again. Like this sentiment, the Laura Ingraham sentiment in America in the 20s passed a constitutional amendment. Something impossible, something that typically takes like a civil war or an assassination to really like be like, oh, we don't have a rule for that. They passed a constitutional amendment that temperate weirdos like her. Now there is a fact that she is right about. The tiny kernel of truth is that marijuana can trigger psychosis in young people. And there's a ton of caveats around that. But regardless of those caveats, which means you have to be predisposed to potentially have a psychotic break due to genetic issues or whatnot. And they really do not know all the science around that. That's true. I offer a better solution, a device to make all well. Let's raise the age you have to be before you can buy a gun. And also for kids to smoke weed. Hate to break it to you, you total idiot. It's illegal everywhere. It is always already illegal for kids to buy weed. So that's not a problem. And you're gonna blame it on weed. That's insane.
Well, what she seems to be saying, and the guests that she's brought on seem to be indicating is the fact that it is illegal for kids to smoke marijuana is irrelevant because adults can smoke marijuana, and thus you have to ban the entire thing, which is the exact same argument that they would apply to alcohol. Wait, no, that isn't actually.
Do you have a subversive thinker, living or dead, could be a writer, could be even a business person, that you think people should look up, look into, know more about, that's underrated and would influence people in a good direction?
Subversive thinker that's underrated?
Yeah.
I'll probably get in trouble for saying this.
No,
I mean, I'd say, how about like Theodore Kaczynski?
Good one. Actually, yeah.
Probably not great to be talking about Unabomber while campaigning, but
probably not great to be talking about how underrated I think the Unabomber's political philosophy was, but I'm gonna push through that like gut feeling that I shouldn't be doing this, and I'm gonna do it anyway. It was an open-ended question. He could have listed anyone that he thinks is underrated, but Blake Masters, who might well be a senator in not too much longer, felt like Ted Kaczynski was the one that he needed to shed light on. And look, we're showing you that video to give you a little bit of it's like a first taste of who this candidate is. This isn't even the scandal that we're here to talk about, Jessica, but I do think it's worth noting that when these guys are so lacking in a fundamental humanity, like emotional intelligence, ability to be a social creature, he couldn't come up with something else in the moment. He just went with the Unabomber. What do you think?
I think it's quite funny considering Ted Kaczynski's background, right? This was someone who was a young student at Harvard who had some radical ideas, and the CIA was conducting experiments there trying to see if they could change people's minds during the Cold War era. And they tortured him and they created a monster. And so he's idolizing someone who is a monster created by the CIA, which is kind of ironic when you think about what the right is. Pretty much a product of US imperialism and just years of brutality in the United States. I think it's ironic that he looks up to someone like Ted Kaczynski.
I know, look, it is possible that maybe he hasn't thought it through too much, but he also strikes me, and from everything that I've seen of his background and his backing from these like crypto connected libertarian like billionaires and everything. This is a guy who definitely thinks that he's thought more about all of his positions than other people. This is a guy who I'm sure has a great deal of confidence in his positions, but when he opens his mouth, tends to be the fact that dumb comes out. But anyway, like I said, we're not here to talk about the Ted Kaczynski thing. We're here to talk about gun violence because he has thoughts on it. And if he becomes a senator, his thoughts about gun violence, what causes it, what doesn't, become very important. So he recently said, this is an interview on the Jeff Orovitz Show podcast. He said, we do have a gun violence problem in this country, and it's gang violence. It's people in Chicago, St. Louis shooting each other. Very often, black people, frankly, and the Democrats don't want to do anything about that. Now, I can't say for sure whether, like with the Ted Kaczynski thing, he felt briefly, maybe I should word this differently or not say the thing that pops into my head, but he just pushes forward. He's a bold candidate in that way. So gun violence in America, it's black people. Frankly, that's what he says. Now look, this is only maybe 10% more explicitly a racist take on gun violence than the vast majority of Republicans will give us. But he chose to go in that direction, Jessica. What do you make of it?
I am almost happy he said this as clearly as he did, because for a long time, Republicans have been trying to make the debate about guns about black on black gun violence, right? They always bring this up. They're obsessed with this talking point. We know that about 60% of mass shootings were committed by white people. And we know recently in Buffalo that the shooter had Nazi symbols on his gun and mostly targeted black people in a black neighborhood, right? And I think we need to think a little bit more deeply about the root cause of the violence, because ever since the end of slavery in the United States, outside of prisons, right, slavery is still legal as a punishment for a crime under the 13th Amendment. But black people in the United States have not been meaningfully incorporated into the formal economy. And what do people do when they don't have a way to make a living, to meet their material needs? They'll go to the illicit economy, right? They're forced essentially to join gangs to meet their material needs. This is happening in the black community and the refugee and immigrant community as well. And so at the end of the day, if you think about it, the reason they're engaging in this violence and the reason they are in gangs is because of the consequences of white people, of people who uphold and create white supremacy in this country and exclude these people systemically from the economy.